Chapter 13. The Cave Clue. Nancy and George hurried over to Bess. She was standing in a pit, trembling like a leaf. They were about to ask her what the trouble was when they looked near her feet. She had unearthed a human skull. "Hypers!" George exclaimed. "You've dug up a grave!" "A very old one, I'd say," Nancy put in. Bess scrambled up out of the pit, but still cringed at the sight of the blankly staring skull. Nancy and George, however, were fascinated. "I wonder if it's an Indian skull or someone who died more recently," Nancy mused. "Let's dig some more and see if there's a body." "If you don't mind," said Bess, "I'll go dig somewhere else for the treasure from the Lucy Belle." The other girls smiled, but told her to go ahead. Using their digging tools very carefully, they dug deeper into the pit, and in a little while disinterred a whole skeleton. "It was an Indian, all right," said Nancy, as she brushed away dirt from one of its legs, disclosing a beaded anklet. George surveyed the scene. "I wonder if this person was buried wearing other jewelry, which later was stolen from the body." Nancy said that, judging by the depth of the pit, perhaps George's second guess was right. Whoever had disinterred the Indian the first time had covered it lightly with soil and not bothered to fill in the whole deep grave. Nancy said excitedly, "I have a feeling we unearthed something valuable that a museum might be glad to get. I think we should notify the police and suggest that a professor from the university come and look at this skeleton." "I think you're right," George said. By this time, Bess's courage had returned, and overcome with curiosity, she'd appeared at the edge of the pit. She was just in time to hear Nancy's suggestion. "I think your idea is a good one, Nancy. Suppose I go back to the house and phone the police." Nancy and George grinned and told her to go ahead. They knew Bess was eager to get away from the gruesome sight. "While she's gone," Nancy suggested, "let's dig around here a little more. Maybe we can find some of the Indians' possessions." After 10 minutes' work, they uncovered a rotting bow and arrow, but did not dare pick them up for fear they would disintegrate. Weary now from their digging, the girls sat down to rest and await the police. Chief Rankin soon arrived, with 2 professors from the University Museum and Bess. The 3 men stared in astonishment at the girls' find. Professor Greentree was a newcomer to Emerson and an authority on Indian history. "I've been planning a dig on this site," he said with a smile. "You girls have beaten me to it." He went to his car for a special stretcher. Then, very carefully, he and his colleague inserted it under the ancient figure. The fragile skeleton was lightly covered with a piece of gauze and carried to the professor's station wagon, which was parked in a side road beyond the clearing. "I'm glad that's over," said Bess. "And I hope we don't meet any more prehistoric men." "Prehistoric?" George repeated. "Why, that skeleton is probably only a couple of 100 years old. Rather handsome, too." George's cousin ignored the remark. She turned to Nancy. "What do we do now?" Nancy reminded the girls they had come to hunt for the long-lost wedding gifts. "Let's dig a little longer." "I'm getting hungry," said Bess, as a gentle hint that they should give up. But the others, after glancing at their wristwatches, told her it was nowhere near supper time yet. "Promise me we'll go in half an hour," she pleaded. "Okay," Nancy agreed. "And instead of digging, why don't we just search this area for clues?" Bess felt better and eagerly joined the search. Weeds were pushed aside, rocks moved out of position. Presently, Nancy said in a low voice, "Listen, I thought I heard someone." The girls straightened up and looked all around. They could see no one. Bess was uneasy. "Probably the phantom is spying on us. It gives me the creeps." "Let's pretend to leave and keep turning around. Maybe we'll spot someone," Nancy suggested. The girls picked up their tools and started walking toward the cove. Every few minutes they would stop and listen. The crackle of twigs behind them left no doubt but that they were being followed. Yet the spy kept well hidden. Nancy purposely was taking a zigzag course, not following their usual route. Soon they rounded a low hill and stopped again to listen. There was no sound of pursuit, and they walked on. Suddenly, they came face to face with a shallow cave. The girls peered inside. Its stone walls were blackened with smoke. Chest high was a ledge, evidently man-made with crude tools. "Do you think Indians used this cave?" Bess asked. "Here's your answer," said George, as she picked up a tiny flint arrowhead from the mouth of the cave. "This is called a bird point and may have been used for hunting birds." Nancy walked around, examining the rough stonework. Above the shelf, she noticed an embedded rock that protruded beyond the others. Curious, she tried pulling it out. The stone gave way easily, showing a small niche behind it. Looking inside, Nancy saw some colored beads and a piece of ribbon, which she pulled out. The ribbon was black, about an inch wide and very old. On it, in tarnished gold letters, was the word Belle. Nancy showed it to the others, who gasped. "A clue!" exclaimed Bess. "This is from the cap of a sailor on the Lucy Belle." "It must be," said Nancy. "But how did it get here?" asked Bess. Nancy had two theories. Either the sailor left it here, or it fell into the hands of an Indian after the sinking or the massacre. "Finding the ribbon here," she added, "lends support to Ben's story." She looked thoughtful. "I wish I knew why the friendly Indians turned on the survivors." George, who had been standing guard at the entrance to the cave, suddenly hissed, "The spy! I saw him! He looks like the man in the boat!" "Where is he?" Nancy asked quickly. Her friend pointed among the trees, but by now the figure had vanished. "Did he see you?" Nancy asked. "I don't think so." This gave Nancy an idea. "What say we surround the spy and capture him?" To this suggestion, Bess gave a flat veto, and no amount of persuasion would make her change her mind. Nancy and George did not think they could carry out the plan alone, so it was abandoned. Nancy put the ribbon in her pocket, and the girls started off once more. This time they could hear footsteps ahead of them in the woods. Once they caught a glimpse of the slight, middle-aged man hurrying away. As the girls quickened their pace, they heard him run. Who was he? Why had he followed them? Finally, they reached the cove at a spot where the embankment was high. Nancy hastened to the edge to see if the mysterious rowboat was in sight. As she stood on the brink, suddenly the earth gave way. Nancy struggled to save herself, but plunged forward with the rocks and dirt. George tried to grab her friend, but failed. She too lost her balance as the earth crumbled still more. End of chapter 13.